What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS core plays for the CJ Cup. Going to go through some of my top exposed plays up top, priced $8,000 and above on Draftkings, and I think are worth getting leverage to, whether it's because of a solid course fit, recent form coming in, maybe they're a little bit lower owned than they should be. In either circumstance, are DFS plays that I think are a lot better than some of their peers, people that you should be looking to get leverage to, and could help you win a GPP this weekend. So with a lot to get into, let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. Our projections are up, and the first player I want to touch on here is going to be Jon Rahm at $10,900. And from a course fit perspective, really checks off at least two of the three boxes that I'm looking for. So if we go over here to the key stats tab, give you an idea of what I'm looking for this week, you can see shots gained off the tee is actually up there at number one, where distance and accuracy are both going to be key factors. Approach play is always going to be number one or number two, so not a surprise there, but kind of worth noting that some of the wedges are going to be overutilized, a few drivable par fours, and also some of the longer irons. There's a lot of longer and shorter par fours, kind of a lack of those middle length par fours, kind of similar to what we saw at last week's event. So looking at some of the wedge ranges and then some of the longer iron ranges a little bit more. In terms of putting, looking at Bermuda putting, last 24 rounds in your baseline, and then a lot of like links golf course stats and a few scoring stats like from 400 to 500 yard par fours, longer par threes, firm conditions, links golf. Just a few of the characteristics of this Congaree Golf Club, which is unique. It's relatively long, a little bit over 7,600 yards, but the most notable aspect of this golf course are the hazard areas, right? Where if you're missing off the tee, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, but it's also a 7,600 yard golf course. So that's why you're looking at both accuracy and distance off the tee. We talked about some of the approach ranges. There's quite a few difficult par fours, also a few difficult shots on par fives that players will be, kind of have to deal with. And then around the green play, I have it here at 7.5%, which is right about average from what we have week to week on tour, but it's going to be important here when you're missing. Every single green is firm and fast. There's no rough around the greens, which means when you miss, you're going to miss by a solid 10 to 15 yards as your ball trickles down into a chipping hollow, which those shots are among the most difficult on tour when it comes to getting up and down. So around the green is going to be a factor, and just some of these other key stats that we've already mentioned. Let's hop back into Jon Rahm there, where he checks the box emphatically off the tee, maybe the best driver in the world when it comes to both driving accuracy and distance. While Rory McIlroy has him in terms of the distance category, Jon Rahm is a lot more accurate off the tee, so he gets a huge boost there this week. And looking at the approach play, of course, right? One of the best iron players that we have on tour. And if you take a look at his recent results, both on the PGA Tour and over there on the DP World Tour, he's been putting the absolute lights out. In fact, has gained over 3 strokes putting in his last 4 starts. Off the tee has been his usual self, just maybe not as consistent on approach as he would hope for, right? He had the win. He had a second place finish over there on the DP World Tour. In one event, he went out there and gained with the irons. That's when he went out there and was able to win, and then had a slightly above positive week where he was able to finish in second place. Granted, the level of competition is a lot higher over here than it was on the DP World Tour, but still getting it done in the top 2 key stats that I'm looking at. And the putting on Bermuda, and in general, like I mentioned, the putter is really trending in the right direction. Over there on the DP World Tour, was gaining 3-4 strokes per event in that category, and is really something that if he's gaining with the putter, we know the ball striking is going to be there. He's going to be in contention literally every single time he gains with the putter. That's just Jon Rahm's MO. He's one of the best players in the world, period. And based on some of the shots gained metrics that we've seen of late, he's really starting to trend in the right direction, because that putter, while it can be volatile, if he's gaining 3 to 4 strokes in any given field, that's really the only missing piece, right? Everything else has been there for quite some time. He had one of the best off the tee seasons ever back there in 2021. The approach play, he was top 10 on the PGA Tour pretty much the entire season. Just a lot of upside for Jon Rahm. And given that he's 18.9% owned, that's one of the highest numbers on the entire slate. That's still 7% lower than where I have Rory McIlroy. So, of course, some of the ownership projections are blacked out. They are on the Patreon page there. But Rory McIlroy is your highest owned player on the slate. So believe it or not, 18.9% on a Jon Rahm is actually quite a nice source of ownership leverage. And next up, our next core pick here is going to be Scottie Scheffler at $10,400. Very similar player off the tee to a Jon Rahm, but an even better iron player. The one issue for Scotty can be his accuracy, but at a course that's playing firm and fast, we've seen him club down off the tee quite a bit. I'm thinking at Brookline, also over there for the PGA Championship in both circumstances, was hitting a lot of irons off the tee, a few hybrids, and even 3-woods off the tee, and still getting it out there 300 to 320 yards. So when you get Scotty Scheffler on a firm and fast golf course, which is exactly what he grew up playing on down there in Texas in some of those amateur events, alongside of Jordan Spieth, all those sort of players, there's a reason why they have a lot of success at golf courses like this. It's because they have a lot of familiarity with the conditions. So $10,400, he hasn't had quite the results we're looking for, right? We haven't seen him all that much. And even at the Ryder Cup, was really struggling. Sorry, I called it Ryder Cup, President's Cup, right? He was really struggling for quite some time. The approach play has been there. Right? He's still gaining over a stroke per round on approach. Off the tee, gaining close to a stroke per round. And sure, the putting has been inconsistent, but on Bermuda greens is where we've seen his best self come out, right? He's gaining over a quarter of a stroke per round, which isn't elite stuff with like what you see with a Matt Fitzpatrick, for example, but it's still well above average for this field. And if he can go out there and gain just 1, maybe 2 strokes on the greens this week, kind of similar to a Jon Rahm, he's at the very least going to be in contention. And you're going to need a win up top. I think one of these 10K golfers, at least somebody in the 9K range, is going to end up taking home the crown this week. It's just when you go, you know that somebody has a floor of getting into contention if they just putt to their baseline on Bermuda. Is something that I'm not going to personally be able to pass up, particularly when he's only 14.7% owned, which is among the lowest of anybody in the 10K range. In fact, he is the lowest owned player in the 10K range. You have Matt Fitzpatrick there, who we're going to talk about next, who's 12.8%, but he's $9,800, right? So technically part of that 9K range. Speaking of Matt Fitzpatrick, let's go ahead and talk through my favorite player on tour. And obviously that's extremely sarcastic. You guys know he's not my favorite player to support. Not my favorite player in general out there, but you got to give credit where credit is due. And on a firm and fast golf course, kind of similar to Brookline. Now, this golf course is a little bit longer, but the thing for Matty Fitz is that he's also a relatively long player off the tee. So he hits a lot of fairways, but he also gets it out there a long way. And on a golf course that's going to reward off the tee play, that's exactly what we're looking for. So kind of similar to a Jon Rahm off the tee. I hate to make that comparison, but Matty Fitz is kind of getting to that point where his off the tee play is like top 5 in the world. And it's not because he's the longest player on tour. Like I said, he's just a little bit above tour average. The guy just stripes it down the fairway almost every single time. So when we take a look at his shots gain metrics, you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. Gaining over half a stroke per round off the tee. The irons have been a little bit more inconsistent, but you're talking about maybe the most consistent short game player that we have on tour when it comes to both your around the green play and your putting. He's probably number 1 in both of those categories. So when we look at his just overall profile here, we know that he's going to have to find a way to gain on approach, but you're talking about a world-class player that is more than capable of doing so. When you take a look at some of his DP World Tour results, they've been hit or miss. He's been all right in a few circumstances, getting into contention, and then kind of flaming out on a few others. So not quite the form of a Jon Rahm, who's coming in on just otherworldly form at this point, but still respectable in his own right. And from the course fit perspective, loves Bermuda grass, is going to have that off the tee play to take apart this sort of golf course, and just underrated, right? 12.8% owned, right? People don't love playing Matty Fitz unless he's coming in with immaculate form. And even somebody like myself that isn't a massive fan of his is still going to get plenty of exposure this week. Our next pick is going to be Tom Kim at $8,900, and I have him at 16.2% right now in terms of his ownership. I am not sure it's going to stay there, though. He's a very popular player. He's played for 3 weeks straight now, which might be a little bit concerning to a few people out there, but he's a young kid, and kind of like a Sanjay M, if anybody's going to be able to take that on, it's these young, exuberant youth that just have all the energy in the world to expend. And even last week, Tom Kim, when he wasn't playing all that well, he got a little bit down on himself on Saturday, but on Sunday, looked like his usual self. So perhaps it was a little bit of jet lag. He's coming back to America, which is just another adjustment that has to be made on his body. So that is the one thing that I really think you could say to hold him back here. But you're talking about a golf course that rewards off the tee play, particularly being accurate off the tee like a Tom Kim is. On approach, he's been stellar in literally every single tour event that he's had. I believe he hasn't lost to this point, and only had 1 week where he was even close to a neutral, and in fact is the best approach player in this field. gaining 1.27 shots gained per round on approach. Just ridiculous stuff. Gaining across the board. The putting has been fantastic. And on Bermuda grass is gaining over a stroke per round putting. Just every key stat we're looking at, right? Off the tee, approach, putting on Bermuda, he is checking emphatically. So even with the concerns about fatigue there, which I think are well warranted, right? It's still something that's kind of nagging at me at the back of my mind. I just can't see myself avoiding a Tom Kim here. He's a great value at $8,900. And if he's only going to be 16% owned, which again, I think that's going to come in higher on Wednesday, right? When we start to get adjustments over the next day due to maybe content out there, you're going to see him probably get steamed up a little bit. But still, even at like 20%, I'm going to be a buyer on Tom Kim. Just a great player, fair price at $8,900. And by the end of the year, might be the most expensive player in a few of these fields. I mean, you have people saying that this is a potential #1 player in the world. If that's the case, he's going to be $10,800 in this sort of event at next year, and you probably want to buy in now. That's my take on it. Next up, we got Tyrell Henley, who loves Palmetto Golf Course. He ended up tying for second, I believe, when they played here in 2021, and led the field in shots gained tee to green. That's the important part here, right? You know, with his off the tee play approach and around the green, he was the best player in the field, lost 3 strokes putting, yet still almost won the golf tournament. And we know that Tyrell Henley is one of the best putters on tour. Usually on Bermuda is an elite level putter too, right? Gaining close to half a stroke per round. So I'm willing to overlook that. You can see the rankings here aren't all that great, right? Number 23 in the field in recent form ranking. He's number 16 in terms of the pricing. But given his success, even in a small sample size here, it's one of the few course history takes I'm going to take, because not a ton of players in this field have had success. A lot of the players that won, like a Garrick Higo, a lot of the guys that finished in second, aren't even qualifying for the CJ Cup. So they're not even in the field. We can't even go to a lot of these course history sort of players. And he's only 12.2% owned. So he's not getting a ton of attention. I think that he's got a decent course fit anyways, right? Off the tee, he can be a little bit inaccurate. So hopefully he can hit some fairways. I think that's the one thing course fit wise that I don't love. But a solid iron player, the putting and around the green play is exactly what we're looking for. And though he hasn't been in a great stretch of form, let's look at his form, right? He's still gaining across all 4 categories, just a slight gainer in all the tee to green categories, but with the putter gaining 0.8 shots per round. So you got to love that for Tyrell. And his event history is elite. So you can see it doesn't really matter because it's been at different golf courses. That's why I have it listed as event history and not course history this time around, but seems to love the CJ Cup. So he has that going for him as well. And the last core pick we'll touch on is Taylor Montgomery at $8,200. And he's one of these young studs that I've been on every single week that he's been on tour. There was one time I faded him and he didn't really do all that much. It was just ownership concerns that week. And now that we've got him in an elite tier field, he's down to a respectable amount of ownership, right? 13.4%. And from what I've heard about Montgomery, from players that have practiced with him, that really know his skill set, you've heard a few broadcasters start to open up about Taylor Montgomery, especially on ESPN Plus. A few of them have actually played him in playing partners with Taylor Montgomery in the past. He's one of the best putters in the world, which I thought he was a ball striking phenom, because based on a lot of the Korn Ferry Tour stuff that we saw, he was like #1 on tour in greens and regulation, #1 on tour in like off the tee distance, that sort of thing. He hits a bunch of fairways too. So he was, up there in both categories. This kid might just be one of the best players in the world right now, because his putting is apparently the best part of his game. I mean, we've seen that on Bermuda. He's gaining 1.46 shots gained per round, which is just ridiculous level stuff. And off the tee on approach and around the green, he's just kind of slowly been chugging along. So if we take a look at this, Taylor Montgomery is gaining across 3 out of the 4 categories, right? Putting close to 2 strokes per round. The guy on ESPN Plus said that Taylor Montgomery was the best putter in the world. I'm not willing to say that yet, but gaining close to 2 strokes per round, it's kind of hard to argue with that. That's twice as good as Denny McCarthy is. He's gaining off the tee, gaining around the green. In the approach play, this negative right here is extremely misleading, and I'll tell you why. Over here at the Shriners Children's Open, nobody really talks about this. He finished in 15th place, right? So he went 3rd, 9th, and then 15th. People might go, oh, that's a little bit disappointing. Taylor Montgomery had to take 7 penalty strokes out of bushes at the Shriners Children's Open. And you're talking about an accurate driver of the golf ball. 7 penalty strokes. If he doesn't have those penalty strokes, he's up there, I believe, in like 2nd, or maybe even tied for 1st at that point. He had a much better week than people want to give him credit for, and he just got screwed by the desert out there at the Shriner Children's Open, a little bit more than most players. So, when you look into some of that, that's just down to variance. If he ended up, rather than beside a rock or inside a bush, just in the desert area, able to chip out, maybe he's in contention, right? But just over and over again. And I believe on one hole, he had to take 3 penalty strokes. He made a 9 on a par 4, all because he hit a ball in a bush. He tried to hit it out. He had to take an unplayable at one point. He had to chip out sideways even after taking the unplayable, and then bogeyed the hole from there. It was just atrocious for Taylor Montgomery. And I think if you don't consider that, right, I mean, if you account for that, I mean, he had a ridiculous week, right? 3rd, 9th, and then probably another top 5 finish. If you look at his Korn Ferry Tour results coming in, it was all top 10s. His top 10 is 10 results coming in. This kid is just going out there and printing results. And considering that he's an accurate driver and a great putter of the ball, somebody I'm just not going to be able to avoid. That is all I've got for this week's core picks. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and let me know in the comments who you think ends up taking this thing home. I'm going to have to take Jon Rahm, but go ahead and let me know your thoughts. And also, go ahead and smash that like button. All the support goes a long way here with helping me grow the channel, helping me grow my brand. So hopefully, you guys feel a little bit more prepared for this week afterwards, and we can go ahead and take down some GPPs this weekend. I'll have a value picks video dropping a little bit later on this evening, covering my top plays below 8 grand. So obviously, these guys were all towards the top of the board. We'll be doing a little bit more of dumpster diving for that video, giving you some salary and of course ownership flexibility that we're always looking for in these large field contests. But that is all I've got for y'all. Best of luck with all of your lineups, any outright bets that you decide to go with, and I'll catch you guys later.